Welcome to Financial Issues, where we join reality with truth, helping you make the most of your money by honoring God with your investments. Now listen in as we give you the practical tools and advice you need to become a biblically responsible investor.
Good morning. Welcome to Financial Issues. Thanks for tuning in today. You have tuned in to Financial Issues. We're a ministry that helps to educate people about financial issues from a biblical worldview, encouraging you to adopt our biblically responsible investment strategy that you can learn about on our website, financialissues.org, and to be a joyful, generous, and obedient giver. Call that funding the light. On today's show, we're going to get to some of the questions that have been coming in a little bit later in the show. I've got Jason McDowell, my friend and colleague, back to discuss government spending and the Trump Sovereign Wealth Fund coming up here in just a minute. And we'll also get to encouragement from the scriptures today. The stewardship verse of the day comes from 1 Samuel 15:22. So last week, Doge dividends were the talk of the town. You know, Elon and his Doge team have been bringing the receipts, and taxpayer jaws are dropping and corrupt politicians' jaws are flapping. So, Jason, walk us through what is before us as Congress and the president begin this arduous task of tackling the budget.
Absolutely. So we're going to talk about spending. So we've talked about cutting with Doge, which is great because they have Doge.gov up so they can actually see the savings receipts, and they're trying to keep as accurate as possible of what actually is being cut. But let's look on the other side of, if Congress is seeing some cutting, they might think they can spend a little bit more based off of the projections of the other side cutting. So that's what I'm going to look at today, and then we'll cascade that into the Sovereign Wealth Fund and my question for Trump there. So Musk has spoken about $2 trillion that needs to be cut. He thought that $1 trillion would be a little bit more of a reality, but Congress seems to be planning on, if $2 trillion is cut, hey, this is how our spending is going to be offset. And so right now, we're looking at the budget resolutions inside of Congress. So that specifically is where Congress starts setting up a spending bill, or as Trump wants to call it, he wants to add his agenda items in there, like the tax cuts and permanency to the tax cuts as one big, beautiful bill. So right now, a budget resolution is before Congress can begin working on a reconciliation bill. That's the bill that goes to Trump. So he will hopefully be able to review what's in there to make sure, you know, it's meeting what he wants as well. But it first has to pass a concurrent budget resolution in the House and the Senate separately. Each budget resolution serves as a roadmap for Congress. And unlike other bills, it does not have to go to the president's desk for signature. Essentially what this is two committees, one in the Senate, one in the House, will put together their spending for their reasons, but ultimately they have to get on the same page before it goes to President Trump. So that's kind of what we're looking at for the spending side, and I'm trying to keep up with it. I feel like Lady Justice with the blindfold on and the weights and measures. Well, there's cutting going over here. I'm a little bit blind to all the spending over here just based off the public information. This is where I want AI to read this bill before Trump signs it. So currently, the Republican-held House is calling for $4.5 trillion in tax cuts and $4 trillion increase to debt limit. Their offsets are going to be based on cutting Medicaid, SNAP benefits, and then the clean energy funding in the Inflation Reduction Act, which means that Inflation Reduction Act was just a spending bill, of course, which we all knew. And
yeah, so you can't legislate inflation away.
No. So the Senate just approved their budget bill, which means that their committee approved something in the Senate, and then the House has either approved theirs or worked on theirs. So the Senate budget approval was approved on February 21st, or called the Graham budget, or I want to call it the sham budget, from Lindsey Graham, and showing allowance of $340 billion new spending. And the spending is one thing, but what I find interesting is that his offset was based on a minimum of $4 billion in deficit reduction coming from other programs and committees. I need to look up more information on what that means, but if you do simple math, if the $4 billion is the minimum, you need 87 committees or other programs to offset that. So is that messing with Doge's cuts? Doge is only at 55 billion, or could be at 60 billion, and within a week or so on how they're cutting. So they're already looking at overspending this. So I don't know. There's where my questions are coming from. Only one senator voted no, and that was Rand Paul, of course.
Yeah. Very fiscally conservative.
Right. So let's hop over to the House budget. So the House Budget Committee approved its own budget right now. I believe it's approved or they're making adjustments to it. There's one thing I saw in it as a caveat is the Freedom Caucus, which is made up of about 40 Republicans, did a last minute amendment that would require the size of tax cuts to be scaled back if $2 trillion in spending cuts isn't achieved. So we already know what's on the chopping block, right? Lowering taxes. So that's the first thing that's going to have to go if Doge doesn't meet this $2 trillion. So these are all just sort of, specific situations that the cutting needs to be maximized before, just to achieve our tax cuts. So I don't think Trump's going to go along with that at all.
Right.
But
so what about the sovereign wealth fund?
Yeah, real quick on that, which bleeds over into it, is the DOD. They both agreed, the Senate and the Republicans both agree that they want to increase the defense budget, which is the DOD budget, basically to get it over $1 trillion. So they actually want to add spending there of the $825 billion that already exists. So they both are agreeing again on spending more in one certain area as well. And that's how the question for the Trump sovereign wealth, how do we fund it, is my big question. The executive order pretty much directs the Secretary of the Treasury and Commerce to deliver a plan within 90 days. So we have 90 days to figure out. My questions to that is, how do we fund it? What they'll have to do is work with the Office of Management and Budget to come up with an economic policy that will look at funding mechanisms, investment strategies. Now, investment strategies, I would say for partners, if you look at the commentary and listen to the most recent conference call, that's something that we're looking at, or Shannon's looking at for the strategy. But my questions are the funding mechanisms and fund structure. What are those going to be? I'm curious what they're going to come up with that. The purpose of this sovereign wealth fund specifically is going to be just for national energy dominance. I can agree with that. Tax and regulatory relief. That's what I hope will happen, but it still needs to be funded. So Congress already wants to pull from tax cuts. So how is this all going to weights and measures out? And then just for robust economic growth.
The sovereign wealth fund concepts are not really new concepts.
No.
So we hear about Saudi Arabia's sovereign wealth fund all the time, and there's lots of other states and countries that have these sovereign wealth funds. For example, Alaska has an Alaska Permanent Fund, and they fund theirs with royalties that come from their public oil. And, they give their citizens back a few $1,000s every single year. They're eligible citizens back. So, it's not really a new concept. It's, I think there's some blueprints already in place for how to do some of those things.
Right. 23 states in America actually have their own. The collected asset total is about $332 billion. So we have almost half of America, as far as the states, there's 23 states that have their own sovereign wealth fund. So it's something in a microcosm way is, being implemented already here. So that's where it's not new. So some of the countries around the world, what do they fund theirs with? So Norway has about 1.7 trillion. The biggest one, of course, is the Gulf Arab countries that have about 5 trillion total. This all actually is less than what America would have for the federally controlled assets, financial assets, but they use oil, something that they, renewable, resource that they use. They fund a lot of it with the oil in those countries. Another one is New Mexico. New Mexico actually uses something similar. It uses their oil royalties and taxes for their sovereign wealth fund. And it's projected that their budget will be fully decoupled in the state based off of annual oil and gas revenue by 2039. This just means that if their budget isn't going to rely on this, so that there can't be any reductions to their public programs like their state's public schools, the publicly controlled land that's there that they manage. It's just saying that the sovereign wealth fund actually works out so that it doesn't have to mess with what the state's already taken care of for the public.
Yep.
So,
gold is another thing that we could put in our sovereign wealth fund. The United States has over 8,000 metric tons of gold, and currently we value those. This came on Trump's comments about, we might not have as much debt as we think we do, because if you offset your assets and your liabilities, it seems to look a lot better. But, right now that gold is valued at $42 an ounce, or a total of $11 billion. If we revalued that gold just at current market value, $765 billion. So there's another thing.
Yeah,
so let's wrap up the thoughts. We just got about a minute left, but I'm going to let you have that last minute to wrap up those thoughts.
Yeah, so right now, Trump's answer to funding is pouring tariffs into the fund. So the ones that aren't being negotiated, used as a negotiation tool to better America. The other part is just that anything that actually comes from tariffs, he's going to pour into that. What he buys with it, of course, is what you talked about a little bit on the partner side. So another possibility actually is the quiet sell-off of public land. Now, some people would think that that's actually bad. There's actually federally owned land in America as an asset. It makes up part of their ownership. And that seemed to have been a possibility of selling to the highest builder. So you have the federal controlled land that won't be public anymore and sold off to private corporations that want to actually pay. So this could be fund managers too, in the area where that would take. So looking at raising the capital the most to get in there was probably from the land that's there. So that's a possibility.
So many things, so many more things that we could say on this. I hear the music though, so we got to go. But thanks for being with us today, Jason. Appreciate all your input. Everyone else, stick around. We've got more financial issues to come right after this break.
Navigating through investment options can be challenging, especially when you're determined to uphold your God-given values. Every dollar you invest is a vote for the world that you want to live in. Let your values guide your investment decisions and help to shape the culture in which we live. Become a beacon of light and pave the way with biblically responsible investing. Timothy Plan, where faith and finance collide. Before investing, carefully consider the fund's investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses of the investment company. This and other important information can be found in the fund's prospectus. To obtain a copy, visit timothyplan.com or call 800-846-7526. Read each prospectus carefully before investing. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal.
Kids need the hope of Jesus. There's so much loneliness, brokenness, isolation, and bullying. Now, you and I, we have the opportunity to do exactly what Jesus said, to go and make disciples right where they are, right inside their public school. The Lord has been building the impact of Crossroads Kids Club, and we ask for your help to pursue a vision of greater national expansion.
To join us, visit reachourschools.com. That's reachourschools.com.
If a woman sees her baby on ultrasound, it doubles the likelihood that she'll choose life. On top of that, we share the gospel of Jesus Christ with her. This is why you should support preborn.
Then they sat me down. If you were to die today, do you think you would go to heaven? And I was like, no. Keeping the child was my first stepping stone. And ever since then, God has cleaned me up from the inside out.
Help support women in need. Go to preborn.com/FISM.
Securities offered through G.A. Reppel & Company, a registered broker-dealer and investment advisor, member FINRA and SIPC. Opinions expressed by Shanna are hers alone and are for informational purposes only and do not necessarily represent those of G.A. Reppel or the outlet on which you are listening. You should consider how the information applies to your situation prior to personally implementing it and consult any financial professional you work with to make sure it's applicable to your financial plan.
Welcome back to Financial Issues. I'm your host, Shanna Bird. I hope that you enjoyed that segment with Jason. I always like having Jason on because he brings the receipts, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does.
Well, folks, I'm going to be out of town for the rest of the week on a much-needed vacation. So I didn't want to leave a bunch of questions unanswered that have come in on the website. So we're going to take the next little bit of time here to try to get as many of them as we can. So, Seth, let's get started.
Yeah, sounds good, Shanna. Starting with Pete, 64 years old. He says, hi, Shanna, you told a caller once that, quote, 13% should be in preferreds. Now, I don't recall what allocation model this caller used. Wasn't sure whether you meant 13% of his portfolio or 13% of what he had in fixed income / preferreds. We use the 45 to 55 model, Shanna, although he says 45 to 65, so I'm not sure which model that is. Okay. And of the total amount in fixed income / preferreds, 33% is in 2 CDs, 4% is in ETF 7, 2% is in FI 68, and then 2% is in FI 55, and 60% in several preferreds. A penny for your thoughts. What do you think, Shanna?
A penny for my thoughts. Actually, the radio program's free, so
that's right.
You don't even have to pay a penny.
You can keep that penny, especially if Trump's going to get rid of them. Then they'll be few and far between now. Anyway,
that's true. What I would say, so I would keep your CDs until they mature. So that was a strategy that we implemented to take advantage of rates being higher in the short term, and I think it's still a good strategy. But as those CDs start to renew, you're going to have to figure out where to reallocate that money to. So I didn't do the reverse math because I see where Pete's going. Like he's looking at he's doing figuring out where 100% of his fixed income allocation is going. I prefer to look at it if you're using the tracker makes it super easy because that last column there, it gives you the holding as a percentage of your total portfolio. So that's an easier metric for me to look at. So the good news about this, Pete, is that you can go back and listen again if you can't write this down as fast as I'm going to say it. But, let's just say that I'm going to assume that you're going to end up in the growth and income portfolio because, we are going to three different ones. And I'm assuming you're going to end up in the growth and income. So in the growth and income, our soft target is to have about 25% between fixed income, cash, and your preferreds. So for your cash, I don't know if you're taking income, if you're not taking income. If you are taking income, I like to have kind of a rule of thumb that you have 12 months of cash, 12 months of your distributions, whatever you're distributing in cash. So whatever percentage of your portfolio that makes up, that's kind of the first stop there. Cash is still paying pretty decent. It's not paying the 5% that it was, but, it's still a pretty decent place. That way, you have kind of locked in for yourself a long-term time horizon because you don't have to sell anything in the next year to get your distributions in case it's down. From there, I would do about 3% of your total portfolio in FX 68, 5% FX 55, and then that would probably leave somewhere around 12% for your preferreds. And that's not a hard, fast rule, but it's just an option to consider.
Nice, Shanna. Lonnie's up next here, 78 years old, saying, Shanna, well, searching for a fixed income investment, I came across government agency bonds. They seem to provide a slightly higher interest rate. Do you have an opinion about this investment vehicle?
Well, it's not a single investment vehicle. There's a lot of government agencies. There's a lot of different government agencies' bonds. There's a lot of different issues. They're probably okay from a safety standpoint, just depending on which one you're looking at. But I really prefer to keep it simple. The way that I look at fixed income in a portfolio is it's going to bring some stability to a portfolio. So you don't want something that's going to have way too much volatility. I think it's more important the stability that it brings and at least contributing some income, some interest to help you stay ahead of inflation with that part of it. But for me, and that's why you'll notice in the fixed income category, we only have a few things on the list and only really 2 of them are going to be investments that can fluctuate a good bit in value. So I prefer to keep it simple.
Nice, Shanna. Next one up is Ray, 63 years old. Ray is saying, I'm overweight on my fixed income / preferred. How do I cash out on this? Do I sell some of my shares? What do I do?
So what I would say is that if you're overweighted because you have CDs that are going to be coming due in the next couple of years, just be content to stay overweighted. Don't sell off your CDs. Wait till they mature. You probably got really good rates on them. If all of your CDs have matured and you're still overweighted, then yeah, you're going to have to look at selling something. So I would use the tracker to see what the percentage of the overall portfolio is, and maybe you can go back and listen to the question before last that I just answered, Pete's question. I kind of gave a break. It seems like you guys may be trying to follow the same model, and I gave a good little breakdown, a good idea for a breakdown for the fixed income part.
Awesome. Next one up, Shanna, is Mark. Mark is mentioning crypto, saying, it's really big right now in the news, and is wanting some guidance on this. What would you have for Mark?
Yeah, so crypto has been a topic of discussion. We do discuss it in our analyst meeting, but we're just not there. Just can't get behind it. It's still very speculative. It's highly volatile. It's very aggressive. It doesn't really seem to be a great fit for the kind of partners that we have. It doesn't seem to be a great fit for our strategy. I mean, things are changing all the time. You know, you have Trump, who's friendly to crypto now. You have the SEC, who has changed leadership, who is going to be different. You know, there are some things that I like about crypto, but we're just not there.
Yep, good stuff, Shannon. Next one is Todd. Todd is 63, and he's wondering, is there a sector for F22 in the portfolio tracker? And then just wondering, what's the difference between financials and financial REITs?
Yeah, so I can look at it real quick and tell, because the first letter is F, it's going to be in the financials. Right now on our asset allocation models, we have kind of a combined the financials and REITs. We finally did separate out preferreds, but when the new website comes out, I hope you guys are excited as I am about it.
Yeah, likewise.
But when the new website comes out, they're going to be broken out separately. So financials will be things like banks, payment processors. REITs are going to be just REITs, real estate investment trust. You know, companies that are real estate companies that distribute most of their rental income to the shareholders, and then preferreds will still have its own separate category broken out.
Awesome, Shannon. Joe is up next here. Joe is 72 years old. He says, I've had the opportunity to hear various discussions on purchasing both MF72 and MF59 from discount brokerage platforms. I currently use Fidelity. I've tried the recommended thoughts to acquire these funds without success. The iShares require a minimum of $100,000 investment per fund, which would greatly overweight me on these positions. Can you offer any advice on how I may realize these without meeting the minimums? What do you think?
So if you've already tried, I know that lots of people have had success just putting in their order for iShares, even though it wasn't for $100,000 and the orders went through. If what you're saying is that you've tried that and it doesn't work, I would suggest that you wait on those. Just wait another few weeks until the new asset allocation models come out. There are some planned reductions in some of the models for those specific funds. So you may not want to add to them until you see the new models. But if you can't get the iShares, the next best thing is to go with the A shares. The A shares, you do have to pay an upfront sales charge, but it's got, lower ongoing expenses. The iShare is the cheapest, has the cheapest cost structure of all of them. So I much prefer the iShare. But if you can't get it, the A share is good. But if you're going to pay a commission, an upfront commission to go into an A share, you need to be sure that you're committed to being in that fund family, for at least 5 to 10 years in order to, spread out that upfront commission over time.
Yep, good stuff, Shanna. Carol's up next here. Carol's 69 and says, if I purchase F3 1 to 3 month, would it be better in our Roth or taxable brokerage? This would be a place for our excess cash position at present. My 73-year-old husband still works, so we use the 55 to 65 model. Right now, our excess cash sits in a Fidelity money market. Thanks for all you do for the partners. What would you have for Carol, 69 years old?
I mean, if you're using it as a alternative to cash, it could be in any of your account. And I just want to make like a little programming note. We recently did change, just for ease of reading. It's FX3 now. It was F3 whenever she sent it in, but it is FX3. So you could use it in any of the accounts. It just depends on what percentage of your portfolio you have in the different types of accounts. Because your Roth is your most tax advantaged account, meaning that you get tax-free growth in that, I would reserve that for only my most aggressive investments, and that would not be FX3.
Awesome, Shannon. Matthew's also 69. He's wondering, what do you think will happen to oil barrel prices if the U.S. produces more? Will this also tank oil stock share prices? What do you think?
Well, if that happened in a vacuum and nothing else happened, then yeah, it would, because more supply means lower price. More supply, same demand, means lower prices. But you've got so many moving parts in the oil market, it's hard to say. But yes, if that happens, if there's more supply than there is demand because of all of the variable factors added up all together, refiners and frackers will suffer. I mean, that's just there's a certain break-even cost that refiners have because they are refining they are making the finished product from from the commodities that they buy. So if the commodities, the lower that the oil prices go, the better the refiners do because they have a higher margin, and vice versa. If oil prices are higher, then the refiners tend to suffer a little bit. So it just depends on which way oil prices go. I think that services, transports, and especially companies that are involved in natural gas are going to probably stand to benefit the most right now.
Sounds good, Shannon. I'd love to squeeze one more in, but I think we're coming to the end here, so I might have to save it for next time.
Well, we gave it our best shot to get as many as we can in. Well, folks, I know you're going to be in good hands for the rest of the week with Seth and Sam, and we've got some other recorded content that I'll be here in spirit. I'll physically be on vacation. So I know you'll be in good hands. Folks, if you're listening on an outlet that only carries the short version of the show, we wish you a farewell today. If you want to catch the full show, go to financialissues.org/live or download the FISM app to catch every live show for free and when it's convenient for you. Make sure to sign up for the FISM newsletter while you're there. I'm your host, Shannon Birch. Stay tuned.
In the last 10 to 15 years being in ministry, being married, something that has been constant in our lives is Samaritan Ministries. As we've moved, we've had babies, we've had different things come up, we have just been able to rely on Samaritan in ways that we never really even thought about before becoming members.
Our heart's desire is to plant roots and be in a place for a really long time. It's how we were raised. We see the benefits of that, but we also see the open-handedness of being used by the Lord wherever He calls, because we just assumed when we started pursuing church planting, the quickest way to get from point A to point B is a straight line. And with the Lord, sometimes you find out it looks a lot more like this. And yet, Samaritan was with us through the entire thing.
We didn't have to look into, we have to change insurances now because we've moved states or whatever the case may be. And it's just been a real blessing to us in different phases of life.
I'm Kyle.
I'm Colleen.
And we're the Gen X.
And we're Samaritan members.
Make a point. No matter what happens, I'll always be there for you.
I know.
My wife and I, we moved into this neighborhood. We had some experience with Crossroads Kids Club. We had served at another club. We kind of thought to ourselves, like, it would be really, really cool for us to actually bring in a club that was able to share the love of Jesus with kids directly into the school. And so we started our Crossroads at Hilltop.
Crossroads is amazing. You can learn all kinds of things about God. That He loves all of us. He died on the cross to pay for our sins. That He will help me in every way.
There is just such tremendous opportunity to reach kids in some of these areas that just aren't being reached.
Sometimes I pray every night. When I feel alone sometimes, God is right there sitting next to me. I can rely on Him no matter what happens.
To learn more about Crossroads Kids Club and how you can get involved, visit reachOurSchools.com.
To Financial Issues, folks. Great to be here with you this Monday morning. I'm Seth Udinsky, and today, Sam Case with me as well. Excited to be here and grateful to take you the rest of the way here on the show. Hey, wanted to mention something for you folks. If you have questions or topics that Sam and I can address while we'll be filling in for Shanna, you just heard Shanna mention she'll be heading on to vacation. If there are topics that we can address, we'd love to hear from them. Please put those into the chat on whatever platform you're watching. If you're on the website, put it there. If you're on Facebook, put it up there. You can send messages as well. If you're not a partner, you can go to financialissues.org and just click that button. I think it's Contact Us up in the top right corner. That way you can send a message to us. You can also call into the show, of course. The phone lines are open. We'd be delighted to get to hear from you, though. So
we also accept carrier pigeons, but I don't know if they'll get here in time.
Yes, we do. Smoke signals is another one. Problem is we're inside, so we can't see them. So that's kind of how that goes. But wanted to just mention that for you folks. Please let us know. We'd love to be able to serve you as best we can. And I'm excited. I know Sam is as well. I did want to make one quick programming note here as well. Many of you know that my wife is almost, she's 37 and a half weeks along with our third child. We're now in the stage where the baby could come any day.
I call this the red zone.
Yeah, this is the red zone. This is like, okay, any time. Megan's doing great and she's showing no signs of going into labor at any time soon. Like, it's not going to happen today, I don't think, God willing. But I just wanted you all to know that in case, say tomorrow you log in and I'm not here, it's not because I, Lord willing, quit or passed away or any of that stuff. It's simply because the baby probably came. We'll make sure to communicate that with you also. But just in case, if you know that could happen at some point, and we've got, of course, some great contingency plans ready for that as well for you also. But I did just want to make a note for that, all of you, that we'll be having that there too. So that's what we're looking like here. It's going to be a good day for sure. Let's take a look at the markets, folks, what they did on Friday. So the market slipped, obviously, by midday. Investors were pretty concerned about the recent drop in the United Healthcare stock. You heard Shanna mention this on Friday's show. It was down around 20% or so. That's when I last looked. That's in the last several months. Of course, on the heels of the controversy surrounding the recent DOJ probe, as well as the murder of the former United Health, I believe it was the CEO. And then there was just a weaker than anticipated consumer sentiment report, left investors feeling a little bit shaky, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we get to the tariffs later on, because it has to do with that. So by late afternoon Friday, the market sell-off gaining momentum. The tech-heavy NASDAQ was leading the way downward, of course. By Friday's closing bell, the Dow Jones was down 1.7%. It was the worst day of the year so far for the Dow Jones. The S&P 500 right about the same, 1.7% down, and the NASDAQ was down right around 2.2 percentage points. I don't think that's quite as low as the NASDAQ was during the whole DeepSeek craze, but still a pretty rough day for it. And somewhat of a rough week, too, for the indices. The Dow Jones ended the week last week 2.5% down. The S&P 500 was 1.6% down, and the NASDAQ was 2.4% down. Now, the pre-markets were feeling pretty good this morning, though, possibly thinking about changing course. And as they have just opened about 5 minutes ago, everything is in positive territory, relatively speaking. The Dow Jones is up a quarter, the S&P 500 is up a fifth, and the NASDAQ is up a tenth. So that's what we're looking like this morning here. Let's get to a headline here. Sam, I think this is quite fascinating and one that I'm excited for. The possibility that the IRS might be abolished. I never thought that anything like that could possibly happen, but here we are in now close to several months into the Trump administration, and we're talking about possibly the IRS being on its deathbed. What can you tell us about this?
I know it sounds way too good to be true,
really
and
does.
I'm thinking, come
really
on,
does.
Donnie T, don't give me hope here. This just sounds too wonderful.
Don't set me up. That would be awesome, man.
It really would be. We were talking about that last week, actually, saying, hey, if you want to go whole hog on the tariffs, you're also going to have to be equally, if not more aggressive on redoing the tax code, hopefully getting rid of most, if not all, federal income tax. And it actually looks like Donald Trump was listening to us. I kid a little bit because he did mention this on the show. I mean, not on the show, on his campaign quite a bit. But last week, his Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick, said that is his plan. It's to completely abolish the IRS and completely rely on tariffs. So here he is talking about that on, I believe it was Fox Business. Hang on just a second.
Think about it. Internal Revenue Service. And his goal is very simple. His goal is to abolish the Internal Revenue Service and let all the outsiders pay. I mean, this is someone who is focused on America. Let's drive down our waste, fraud, and abuse.
So there he is. He's saying he wants to completely abolish the IRS, replace it with the External Revenue Service, going from the Internal Revenue Service to the External Revenue Service. There's a little bit of a quibble about that because still ultimately Americans are paying for these tariffs. But if you're getting rid of the IRS on top of that, it doesn't feel nearly as painful as paying both, paying the double whammy. Howard Lutnick says that paying the reciprocal tariffs, which is Donald Trump's plan, would net the United States something like $700 billion in net income, which sounds like a pretty good deal.
Yeah, absolutely it does. Sam, I think all I can say here is good for Trump. I think he's trying to bring America back to, in the best sense of the word, the good old days. We always talk about going back to the good old days, and you hear people say, well, the good old days are right now, or you can never go back to the good old days. And in some areas, definitely it's not good to go back. In other areas, though, it is good to go back to the roots and to the old ways. And I do think that there was something here that the founding fathers had in mind, Sam. I just can't help but wonder, did George Washington think, what would be a great idea? Let's tax the heck out of the American citizens and have that be the way that our government is funded. I just can't bring my mind to believe that he would think that.
Especially when you consider why the Revolutionary War was started to begin with, over taxes.
And over pretty minuscule taxes, comparatively speaking, to what we have now. I agree with you completely. I think Trump is trying to go back. He's trying to reverse the clock previously behind the 16th Amendment, behind 1913, when our government was not primarily funded by what I believe is really the legal thievery of the tax system. It was funded much more by tariffs. I would much rather that. I think that's the way it should be, and I think that's the way that the founding fathers had it in mind as well, Sam. So I think it's pro-America all the way. I think it's a breath of fresh air. I do think there are some things that need to be worked out with it. And, like you said, I think coupling
it's going to require Congress. They're going to have to get off their tuchuses and actually get involved in the whole process. It's not supposed to just all be done by the president. And unfortunately, Trump's been kind of flying solo, and that's not how government's supposed to be done in the United States. I understand they're working on the whole massive spending bill that Trump wants to get done. But still, most, if not all, of Trump's actions here need to be backed up by Congress on the legal level, or else once Trump's gone, a lot of this stuff's just going to go away too.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that completely, Sam. With all this stuff, what we want to see from people in power is people who are not just about gaining power, but actually they're trying to make the country better, not just gaining power, building a massive net worth. Speaking of which, that brings up, we had a great question on the chat earlier that I don't know if we'll have time to get to because of the ag report. George, your question that Eddie had retyped in there, Eddie, I appreciate that a lot. Let's try to get to that on the other side of the ag report here, because that has a lot to do with this. So George, just hang on for a second on the chat there, and we'll get to that question. Before the ag report here, folks, let me just give you what we can expect for this week in terms of the economy. Not much today. Tomorrow we'll get consumer confidence for the month of February. Wednesday we get new home sales for January. Thursday we get the GDP second revision. We get the jobless claims as usual for last week. Friday we get the PCE index. I think the big news this week, folks, probably will be earnings season, which is winding down, but this is really one of the bigger weeks for earnings season. A few heavy hitters still left to report for the final quarter of last year. Today we had Public Storage, not much else. Tomorrow we'll get Home Depot as well as Intuit. Wednesday is probably the big day. We get NVIDIA, Salesforce, Lowe's, Anheuser-Busch, which we'll talk about also in the next segment. Thursday, we get Dell, Vistra, not much else. Friday, we get Berkshire Hathaway. So a couple really big heavy hitters coming in for earnings season as we close it out. Hey, folks, we got Craig Howgard coming in. Craig is going to join me tomorrow for a live ag report. He was just on recently, but I wanted to make sure we got Craig in before the baby comes. If you have questions for Craig tomorrow, send those in. For now, here's today's ag report. We'll be right back.
This is Craig Howgard with your Financial Issues Ag update for February 24th. Well, corn was pressured Friday by improving weather forecasts in Argentina and Brazil, weak energy markets, and fund selling. Now, the news wasn't all bleak as the weekly export sales numbers came in near the top end of expectations. May corn finished the day 7 3/4 cents lower at $5.05 per bushel. Soybeans also had very good weekly export sales numbers, but it wasn't enough to offset improving crop conditions in South America. As a result, May beans finished the day 5 3/4 cents lower at $10.57 1/4. Any support that wheat wheat had was the result of strong weekly export sales. Now, usually the sales pace drops sharply this past week and going forward. This time of the year, for example, it's not uncommon to have net cancellations for the week. The strength of last week's sales continues to push the USDA towards raising their annual export forecast. The question is if there's room for a higher export number without dragging down the carryout enough to cause a shift higher in U.S. wheat prices. At the closing bell, Minneapolis May wheat was a penny and a quarter lower at $6.46.5. Kansas City rose by a penny and 3/4 to close at $6.21 3/4, and Chicago was 3 3/4 cents higher at $6.04. Cotton futures struggled in the face of a stronger U.S. dollar. At the closing bell, the May futures ended the session 13 points lower, settling the day at $67.34. Livestock futures were mixed. April live cattle were 15 cents higher at $193.95 per hundredweight. April feeder cattle rose by $1.17.5 as they settled at $267.55 per hundred. After the closing bell, we had the monthly cattle on feed report released. It was viewed as neutral, with most of the numbers coming in very near pre-report estimates. April lean hog futures finished the day 85 cents lower on Friday as they closed out the week at $87.67.5 per hundredweight. Class 3 milk futures slumped heading into the weekend. We had March futures down 14 points at 19.06. Well, this has been Craig Haugard with your Financial Issues Ag Update. We'll be right back with more financial issues after this.
It's up to us to stand up and say, enough is enough. All of this unbiblical stuff that's going on, whether it's abortion or transsexual or LGBTQ, widespread pornography, human trafficking. Bottom line, it's still up to us. If we stop investing in these corporations that are trying to destroy us, sooner or later they're going to wake up.
To learn more about biblically responsible mutual funds and ETFs, go to timothyplan.com.
If a woman sees her baby on ultrasound, it doubles the likelihood that she'll choose life. And on top of that, we share the gospel of Jesus Christ with her. This is why you should support preborn. The donations that you give actually make a difference. Last year, 59,000 babies were saved because of what you have done and with your generosity.
To find out how you can support the life-saving mission of preborn, go to preborn.com/FISM.
What separates Crossroads Kids Club from other ministries to reach school-age children? What sets you guys apart?
First of all is our connection with local churches. We mobilize, equip, train, support local church partners. We're right inside the schools. There's a number of ministries that try to serve public school children outside of the school, but we're able to be right there on the campus. Another key thing is just our values. Our highest value is actually relationships. And so we're not a ministry that's driven by a lot of fancy technology or flashy stuff, but rather getting adults who love Jesus and who love kids to sit on the floor with a group of kids, to listen to them, to love them. So I would say the relational emphasis and the simplicity of the model is actually something that makes Crossroads special as well.
Help reach kids with the hope of the gospel. Visit reachOurschools.com.
The opinions and recommendations expressed on this program do not necessarily represent the opinions of the station or any of the program sponsors. Additionally, all products or services offered by the program sponsors may not be known by the program.
Welcome back to Financial Issues, folks. Great to be here. Hey, did want to remind you, I was up against the ag a little bit there. Craig's going to come on with me tomorrow. We're going to do a little bit of a follow-up from the bird flu, just because that is something really important for us to be able to talk about. And as I said, I do want to get Craig in before the baby comes. So if you have questions, follow-up questions for Craig, I know some of you did, and I'm going to have those teed up for him from our last time that we just didn't quite have time to get to. So if you have questions for Craig, please send those in via the chat. You can send them to me via email as well, Seth@FISM.tv, Seth@FISM.tv. Just make sure that you send them to me tomorrow by tomorrow at like 9:30 Eastern time or so, because that's when Craig's going to be coming on. So if you got questions, make sure to send those over. Speaking of questions, Sam, I just put this one in the chat. It's under Eddie's name. The question comes from George, but why don't you read that question for us that we just got in on the chat there?
All right, I had to find it for a second there. It's like, where is Eddie? There we go. We finally found Eddie. So Eddie's from Tennessee, and he says, anyone wonder how much of our nation's debt is legitimate? Are some of the things we are paying for excessive, such as price gouging and or fraudulent, i.e. attorney fees for services they didn't provide, etc.? Audit the national debt, ! And then he says, not my idea, asking for a friend.
That's great. Thank you guys both. George, I know that was your question, and Eddie, thank you for putting that back in the chat for me so I could see it. So I think it's a great question, and I think you're exactly right to be asking it. I would not be surprised if a lot of our debt is illegitimate, whether it's paying for, like you said, paying excessive price gouging, fraudulent fees. How about all the COVID spending that happened? Where is that money? And how about this also? I was just looking into this before the show came in. Has any of you ever wondered, why is it that when elected officials go into office, their net worth skyrockets? I mean, it is insane. It's insane. The salary of, so I checked this just now as I was looking at this question. I think Nancy Pelosi's salary is somewhere in the neighborhood of $200,000 a year, which is a decent salary. It's not bad. Her net worth is somewhere in the hundreds of millions.
It's crazy.
It's somewhere in the hundreds of millions. Now, I know a lot of people will say that's from her investments. There's a big question there if there's insider trading going on.
Right. I heard that there are certain investment accounts that people have that specifically are just copying everything that Nancy Pelosi does.
Absolutely.
And so they grift off of her insider knowge, her potential insider knowledge.
And let me give the disclaimer here that is no way what we are telling you to do here. She's probably not investing in a biblically responsible way. And if it's insider trading, that's really bad too. But my point in bringing all that up is, Sam, I can't help but wonder if part of the reason why these net worths skyrocket is underhanded favors, payments, different things like that. I mean, the unfortunate part of it is that politics is a dirty game. And a lot of politicians, unfortunately, are willing to play the game. So I'm not saying that's the reason, George, but I would not be surprised if there's a lot of taxpayer dollars that goes to things like that also, unfortunately.
Well, and you're in luck, though, because we have this thing called Doge now.
Right.
And people are focusing a lot on the first task of Doge, which is finding a bunch of nonsense in the government and cutting that spend, fraud, and abuse. And I think that's a lot of the stuff that Eddie's talking about here.
Absolutely.
And hopefully Doge is going to uncover most, if not all of that.
I certainly hope so. And I did see several of you in the chat were proposing that. And I think that's exactly right. I hope that happens. And they've been setting a good precedent so far. So we'll see if they can keep that up. Sam, you mentioned nonsense. Speaking of nonsense, it appears that Bud Light still has not recovered from the Dylan Mulvaney controversy from now 2 years ago it was. What can you tell us about this,
Isn't
Sam?
this insane,
It's
right?
unbelievable.
This was an iconic American company, and they've just gone into the gutter over one stupid thing, and rightfully so. I'm not saying that they shouldn't have been lambasted for that, but it's just amazing how one mistake can absolutely ruin a company. Part of the problem, in my opinion, is they've not sufficiently apologized for it either. They've yet to recognize what they did by offending most of their customer base by hiring a transgender actor to promote their beer, which goes to blue-collar workers. They still haven't really put together that was the big problem. They've yet to issue an apology, an official apology. But so we're working on 2 years out from this thing when they hired Dylan Mulvaney, the transgender guy, for their company, and former Anheuser-Busch president of operations Anson Frericks. He told Fox Business earlier this month the company is still on its heels. He said they've lost 30% of their customers. Here he is talking about that.
Has Bud Light recovered? They haven't at all. I think that's one of the most interesting parts about this story is that they lost 30% of their customers, and millions of customers, billions of dollars of shareholder value over the last couple of years. They continue to shed customers. The stock price is almost off 50% from when they made this partnership with Dylan Mulvaney.
Now, Bud Light does recognize they're in a hole and they're trying to recover that image. I don't know if you saw the Super Bowl ad, but they're trying to get back to their backyard sports kind of feel. They hired Peyton Manning, Post Malone, and some other people as well that are maybe going to appeal to that working class base. And it was a fun ad, and I think that if it wasn't just done in isolation, it might be effective in actually getting the brand back to where it needs to be. But that is the question, right? Is this just window dressing, or has Bud Light actually learned its lesson? And I did a little bit of research on this, Seth, and it appears maybe not so much, because according to my research with our screeners through Timothy Plan and others, Anheuser-Busch has sponsored over 20 pro-LGBT events and groups in 2024 alone. You would think a lot of that stuff would have been done in 2023, but no. That was last year. So well after they were feeling the repercussions of Dylan Mulvaney, they're still doing this stuff. And a lot of it was done late into the year. It wasn't even the beginning of 2024. So just a couple months ago, they were sponsoring this stuff. So outright betraying the whole effort that they're publicly doing to win back that consumer base really shows they're not learning their lesson the way they should.
Absolutely. You know, Sam, as you were talking there, and by the way, great job on that research, man. That's really good stuff. This reminds me, there are a lot of biblical concepts we can connect to this. The first idea is the very meaning of the word hypocrite. I don't know if you know the meaning of this word. I believe it's Greek in origin, and it has to do with being two-faced. It was as if, you know, you were a play actor putting on a mask.
I was going to say, it goes back to the stage, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. And so that's exactly what Anheuser-Busch is doing here. Exactly what they're doing here. They are being two-faced. My good friend Art Alley has quipped on the show before. He says, and I quote, "I almost wish I drank Bud Light in the first place so I could celebrate this by not drinking it anymore." And I love that. That's exactly right. I feel the same way. I am not one who does drink Bud Light, but part of me wishes I did so that I could stop drinking it to celebrate. But man, this is, this is the equivalent, Sam, to saying the following. So imagine I come into work today and I tell you a story. Hey, Megan's real frustrated at me. Why? Because I said something really nasty to her. I mean, I was really mean. Like, I said something real nasty and I know it. But rather than just apologizing and saying, hey, I'm sorry, I was a moron, I shouldn't have said that, I spend the day trying to buy back her love, her good graces. I buy her flowers. I get her chocolates. I say, hey, let's go on a date. Don't you love me so much? It's almost like I'm tricking her into looking favorably on me again without having to get into the real dirty work of apologizing. Because apologies aren't fun. No one likes to apologize. If you're truly apologizing and asking for forgiveness, you're admitting you did something terribly wrong.
It might even be worse than that, though. It'd be like if you bought those flowers and the chocolate and the card and you wrote a note, a really nice note, but at the bottom of it was another insult.
Yeah, that's exactly what Bud Light's doing here. You're exactly right. Yeah, and what they need to do is what any good husband in that situation should do with his wife is apologize. I screwed up. We screwed the pooch. We messed up. We offended a huge part of our customer base, and we messed up. We shouldn't have done this. And I'm not saying, look, it would be great if they explicitly said those words. I think in the corporate world, there's a little bit of a different way that you do it as opposed to individuals. But if they had said something like that, boy, I think many people... I think
they're this deep in the hole that they need to do that, in my opinion.
Absolutely. I don't think they have any other choice. Yeah. But I also wonder if they're thinking we're so deep in it, now an apology is just going to make everybody realize what they already know, but they'll all realize, hey, we really screwed up, and they did. Boy, they really screwed up. Yeah. Apologizing is not easy, folks. It's tough to admit we messed up. But again, another biblical concept, if you mess up, you have got to ask for forgiveness. You've got to do that. Take a lesson from Bud Light on what not to do.
I just want to say to people listening, you're thinking, oh my gosh, like this company's playing the hypocrite. They're saying one thing and they're doing something else behind their back. That can be really discouraging because, you'd like to think that you can base your investments and purchases off of the public statements that companies make. And unfortunately, that's not always the case. So if you're someone listening and maybe you're not a partner and you're thinking this is really discouraging, I would encourage this to be a springboard for you to maybe look into becoming a partner with us, because we do a lot of that research, like what I was talking about, to make sure that what companies are publicly saying is matching up with what they're doing behind the scenes.
Sam, you're exactly right. And part of the partnership is we have boots on the ground too, in the sense of our petitions, different things like that we offer for our partners. Now, our petitions are for partners and non-partners alike, but if you're a partner, you can use your investor dollars for that impact. You can invest in the companies that we recommend. I can't agree more with what Sam said there. Absolutely. Folks, as good a time as any to close the show with our stewardship verse, and this is a timely one with what we just talked about. 1 Samuel 15:22. Samuel said, "Does the Lord have as much delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying the voice of the Lord? Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to pay attention is better than the fat of rams. He was speaking here to someone who, similarly to Bud Light, had screwed up, needed to apologize. That was King Saul. And ultimately, King Saul would end up getting the kingdom wrenched away from him. And it was in very much the same way because of this particular thing here. Folks, we want to remind you, obedience is what matters most. To obey is better than having a massive portfolio. To obey is better than currying the favors and currying the pleasing ears of men. Obedience to God is what matters most. And that's why we're here. Our strategy, we believe, is a strategy that you can follow and be confident that you are obeying God with the money that He has entrusted to you. Well, God bless you all. It was good to be here with you today. We'll do it again tomorrow, Lord willing. Until then, remember, all you have belongs to the Lord. Let's be found good and faithful stewards with it. God bless you all. See you next time.
If we ever forget that we're one nation under God, then we will be a nation gone under.
Thank you for joining us. This has been an FISM production.